It's my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker for this opening session. Dr. Andrea N. Williams is Associate Provost of English at The Ohio State University, where she specializes in African American and 19th century American literature. She earned her Bachelor's of Arts from Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, where she was valedictorian of her college graduating class. She earned her PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and was awarded a postdoctoral fellowship at Rutgers University in 2008-2009. Professor Williams is author of a new book titled Dividing Lines, Class Anxiety and Postbellum Black Fiction, published by the University of Michigan Press. The book focuses on the period between the 1880s and 1900 and traces representations of the Black middle class and its often tense relationship to broader Black communities. She is now at work on a study of single Black women in African American literature and popular culture. In relation to her research, Professor Williams recently has taught classes such as labor and class mobility in U.S. fiction, and in spring 2014, for courses, she will be teaching a special topics class called Literary Mixtapes, Music Genre, and African American Literature. So, I might have to take that myself. For nearly 2 decades, she has also been a community mentor in local and national organizations, including Summer Bridge Atlanta, the Blue Ribbon Mentor Advocate Program in Chapel Hill, and Big Brothers Big Sisters. Here at Ohio State, she also volunteers with the Economic Access Initiative, which focuses on recruitment and retention for first-generation college students. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Williams.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me. I first want to extend my special thanks to Dr. Moore for inviting me, and also for Todd Sedith, with whom I've been in contact in my preparations. And I really consider today as one of the highlights in my time here at Ohio State. I am privileged and honored to really contribute to the work of scholarship and community building that has been going on at the Bell Center. So I'm really glad to be here. And I want to welcome all of you here to Ohio State and to what I hope will be a really transformative experience for you. First of all, I want to start off by congratulating the incoming class, because you've already done some good things. You've already made some right decisions, you've made some planning, you stayed home some nights, you studied SAT prep books, you decided to make some sacrifices so that you could be here. And so I trust you to continue to make those good decisions. In addition, I really want to say thanks as a professor for parents and friends who are sending me more students to teach. Keep them coming, keep them coming, keep them coming, okay? So I really appreciate those who put in more time to be those parents, to be those aunts and the uncles and the person who makes sure that they get to track practice or that they have all their homework done on time. Because by that extra push that you gave the students here, you help them to even now be ready to stand on the threshold of destiny. I kind of like that phrase, the threshold of destiny. It would make a good book title, or maybe it'll make a good title for your own autobiography one day. The threshold of destiny. Or you could call it a continuation of the journey. You could call it a new beginning. These are all ways, somewhat familiar, maybe even cliche, that we could think about as being the start of college, because it's something new. And you know, as I think about these kinds of expressions, it also reminds me of the turning points that happen in the lives of either real people or fictional characters in African American literature. The books that end up being the reference points for me so often as I'm thinking. As you heard, I am an English professor, and so I am often thinking about, is it life that imitates art, or is it art that imitates life? They all get confused in my mind, so I really want to draw some examples from both of those today in helping you to think about your own next steps in the journey. One of the classes that I really love to teach is a class that's called Growing Up Black, African American Coming of Age Narratives. And that class is all about fiction or nonfiction books on maturation and on rites of passage. In that class, I like to do Richard Wright's Black Boy or Paul Marshall's Brown Girl Brownstones. And more recently, I've added Tayari Jones's Leaving Atlanta, again, another nod to my Atlanta background, as well as Jay-Z's book, Decoded. So again, if you would like a taste of some of those things, I hope that you will join me in my class next semester as well. But one of the images that really stands out to me in some of the books that I read is from Langston Hughes's autobiography that's called The Big C. And I think that there he talks about his own coming of age in a way that really might resonate with you as you think about what you're about to embark upon here. Langston Hughes was a poet, a novelist, an autobiographer, a playwright who was really at the height of his career, let's say in the 1920s, 1930s, contributing to the Harlem Renaissance, which was a period of intense artistic development happening in Harlem and other places in the world as well in the 1920s and 1930s. But a little bit closer to home, Langston Hughes was just a homeboy from Cleveland. Do I have any people from Cleveland here? Okay, great, yeah. So Hughes ended up graduating from Central High School in Cleveland. I think that closed in the 1980s or so, but again, that was part of his trajectory. And from his time from Cleveland, graduating high school, he ended up having a number of both productive and disruptive, life-altering relocations that really changed how he thought about himself and how he thought about the goals for his life. So in The Big C, he recalls what he considered one of his most deliberate acts of self-emancipation. Around this time, he was about 21. He had been enrolled in Columbia University, what we think about as one of the premier U.S. institutions of higher education, beyond Ohio State, I may add. But he wanted something different. So here's this young man whose father luckily had enough money to be able to send him to college. He's there at Columbia, and all things, he decides he's going to drop out of school, decide to go into food service on a ship that's headed to Africa. And one of his final gestures of trying to prove himself is that he takes all his textbooks from Columbia and throws them overboard. Okay? Now, first of all, to parents who have just laid down their good money for textbooks, I want to remind you that that's not the part of the story that I want for you to concentrate on, okay? At least Hughes should have had the good sense, maybe time didn't quite catch up with him, to resell his books. Too bad he didn't have eBay back in the day, right? So it's not that I'm suggesting that you will leave here and do something else. Believe me, the early arrival program, the Bell Center, and so many other resources here are all about keeping you here, retaining you as talented, gifted young minds who will contribute to this university. And yet there is something to be learned from his example. So in sharing his life history, I'd really like for you to think about Hughes made this striking gesture of throwing those books overboard because he thought about, in order to enable himself to find his voice, to decide the way that he wanted to write, to throw off the model of what a Shakespearean sonnet should look like or whether or not a poem should rhyme, that he had to throw off some of the tradition that was stifling him. So throwing out those books ended up being a symbolic gesture in some ways. Writing about this experience later, Hughes explained, it was melodramatic, perhaps, it seems to me now, but then it was like throwing a million bricks out of my heart when I threw the books into the water. Then I straightened up, turned my face to the wind, and took a deep breath. And I felt that nothing would ever happen to me again that I did not want to happen. I felt grown, a man inside and out, 21. Now, those of us over 21 might chuckle at that a little bit. And again, even Hughes does. But there's something in that moment that he realizes is freeing. And that I hope that you will think about as freeing as you think about what is it that you might need to throw overboard before you get here. What is it that your calling is requiring you to discard as you move forward? As the rest of the story goes, Hughes does later return to college, not to Columbia, but to the historically black college, Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, where he graduates in 1929. And he describes how much he eventually enjoys his college experience, finding that it was both formal education and extracurricular activities such as travel that really fueled his imagination. But I want to go back to that gesture of throwing the books overboard and really use that to guide my comments today, because I think that it suggests to us 4 key approaches that I think will be useful for you in your college experience here. And those are do, ask, reflect, connect. Do, ask, reflect, connect. Hughes boarded that ship because he wanted to do something. He wanted to experience life hands-on, not just read about it in the book, but get out there and live it. And then he began to ask questions. He began to interrogate the received knowledge that was in those books and to think about if that knowledge was true to who he was. He also reflected on and thought seriously about his growth and his goals. And he connected with new knowledge and networks that would help him to be his best. So the first one, again, is to do. And remember, again, you don't have to leave college in order to do and experience life. In fact, I think that too often people make you feel like you're living in some kind of bubble and that college is only pretend or it's only practice for the real life that's going to happen. Believe me, it's real life right now. And these are years that will never come back to you again. No matter how much you keep looking in your college yearbook and wish they would. Okay, that's just me. But again, you have to think about you're living real life right now. And I think that that was part of what reminded him and maybe drove Hughes in that case back to college to think about it's an even balance here on campus and outside. And you can find ways on OSU's campus and beyond it to do what you love. Make the most of this experience. As a political science major, for example, you might not only just want to read about electoral politics. Get out and help people register to vote in Franklin County. Decide that you want to run for student government here on campus. As an education major, don't just read about ways to motivate students. Go out and do it. Be a mentor. Work at some of the local schools as a volunteer in some ways. Find a way to bring to three-dimensional life everything that you've been reading about. If you've always wanted to do something someday out in the future, see if that someday can begin now and whether it can enhance rather than distract what you're already doing as a college student. Some of my students, for example, have been thinking about the ways that, very literally what you all mentioned earlier, they're starting businesses as college students and really collaborating with some of the other young men that they know here on campus. So you might think about if that's part of what you want to do. But my second point is even more crucial. Ask. Ask questions. Interrogate easy answers. Now, I don't know about you, but there have been a few times when I was growing up where I started to believe there's no use in asking questions, because you never get the answer that you want. And some of these times, it happened with the adults in my life. And here's how the conversation would usually go. Me. Why? And then the adult says, help me out here. What did they say? Because I said so. End of story, right? Luckily, there are some ways that protects us when we're younger, when we're children, maybe when we're even adolescents. when we need the urgency and the caution of what an adult has to tell us. But by this stage in our journey, we want to move on to cultivate our own independent thinking. Being in college is not about somebody telling you what to think. It's about helping you to figure out how to think so that you have at your disposal the analytical tools to interrogate knowledge in any field that you choose, to use your reasoning skills to think about culture and politics and design and other issues. Again, two practical ways that you can begin asking those questions. One is by contributing to classroom discussion. And second is by visiting your instructors during office hours and coming with that good, strong, firm handshake that Jean demonstrated for us earlier there. Because for most professors, asking why won't simply get you the answer because I said so. It will actually get you more engagement. So don't be afraid to inquire. But I especially want to urge this point strongly because I would insist that asking questions isn't just about gaining more knowledge. It's about understanding and asserting power. We've often heard it, that knowledge is power, but if that's the case, then we need to interrogate who has access to the power and knowledge, who has created the power and the knowledge, whose interests are being served by power and knowledge, and whose knowledge is being circulated or repressed. Now, these are questions that I started to ask myself when I was a first-year student at Spelman College. And for me, many of these questions were brought to my attention when I encountered a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. In it, the author analyzed how even people who think they are educated are sometimes only trained, the same way that you might train an animal, because they are trapped in the status quo. So this book really distinguishes between two different kinds of learning, and I really want you to remember this, if nothing else that I say. The two different kinds of learning. One is the banking education model, and the other is the problem posing. The first, the banking education model, is the model when you as a student are treated like a receptacle, like a box, like a container, and the teacher comes along and pours into you as a deposit, comes back later for a quiz and withdraws that deposit. Now, what do you think are the limitations to that model? Why might I not suggest that you allow yourself simply to be a safe deposit box for other people's knowledge? What are the limitations of that model? Uh-huh.
It's not necessarily answer my question, you know the concept behind it.
Right. Great. Let me hear from you.
Long distance, like the long term, you know it right now, but in maybe 2 years when you actually need it, you know it.
Yeah, excellent. In the back.
You only know what people have told you. You don't try to solve problems for yourself.
I love it.
When you like engage in that type of learning, you don't necessarily understand the information you got. It's more like memorization.
Great. And there are some things you need to memorize, right? You need to know that 2 times 2 is 4. That's going to always be the case. But if the answer that's being looked for is 4, then maybe also 4 plus 0 is 4. 4 minus 1 plus 1 brings you back to 4 all over again. 2 plus 2 is 4. If you're looking for 4, how many ways can you get to 4? Think outside the box there. Now, the problem posing method instead is what I suggest would be better for you to engage in. It's the model that I try to use in my classroom, and that if you figured out is what I just did, right? I ask you, tell me what you think about. I'm not up here to pour into you. I'm here to exchange with you. And so if your professors are not doing this, again, go to office hours. Get that feedback that you want there. But again, problem posing, the function of that is really to unveil reality for you. so that you can, in the immediate and the long term, think about what's your place in reality and how are you intervening in creating new realities for others. Don't allow yourself to be placed in dehumanizing ways that suppress in some ways your gifts of creativity and of intervention in your own reality. Instead, it was by questioning, asking tough questions, questioning power, questioning received knowledge, that anti-slavery and civil rights activists determined to claim greater freedom. And for Ohio State student Jesse Owens, it was by questioning power and committing himself to excellence that he was able to score 4 Olympic gold medals in 1936, a feat that challenged the period's racist assumptions, supposedly based on scientific knowledge, that black bodies were inferior to others. So again, I want for you to think about who is it who has created the knowledge that's being circulated and whose interest is it serving. Yes, you have to study these systems in order to negotiate them, but what this university needs and what this nation needs is not simply people who will regurgitate the same answers back, but others who will set new paths, not only by revising the knowledge that they have received before, but sometimes by rejecting it altogether. We need those who will lead the way forward by building on and, when necessary, challenging those expectations. Innovation and change can happen only when people with a keen understanding of the existing systems envision and enact a better way out. And I believe that there's the potential and the power within this very room to come up with new artistic expressions or new medical and technological advancements and new models of ethical public service. All of that is in this room right now, sitting right beside you. But it all starts with asking probing questions. Perhaps a natural outgrowth of asking questions of others is to ask them of yourself. And this is where I get to the point about reflecting. Reflect on what you are learning, how it's changing you, how it's refining you, how it's exposing you, not just as a thinker, but of a person. And this is one of the things that I want to say to parents. If we, at the end of the semester or next summer, send you back exactly the same student with simply more book smarts, you need to ask for a refund. Because we are not giving you what you came for. We came to allow your student, to enable your student, to foster your students in creating new identities, new ways of thinking, new ways of being. And that transformation can only happen when you're both open-minded and true to your core. So there's a fine balance there that you need to think of. But what we need to remember here again is that in showing your place in the world, you're not here simply to receive an education, but to make one. And you can do that best when you reflect on who you are. As you're setting goals, however, you might find, like Hughes, that there are some things that you need to throw overboard. And so I ask you again, what are the mental scripts and the experiences that you need to throw overboard, or if not, to discard, to revise, to be the person that you really want to be here at Ohio State? Do you need to change the mindset that has allowed you to be motivated by fear instead of by faith? Do you need to drop your habits of procrastination and perfectionism? Do you need to change the idea that there are only certain things that real men or real black men do? Do you need to, in some ways, shed the self-consciousness that you have about being the first in your generation to come to college? Or maybe the self-consciousness that you have about being from a little hometown, as I was at one point. Think about, reflect on, what are your goals? And what is it that you need to throw overboard to make them happen? Back in my day in college, Erykah Badu put it quite simply when she said, pack light. So that might be something that you think about here on your journey, pack light. And keep in mind, though, that Hughes, even as he's throwing those books overboard, he's deciding to write new books, to rewrite the story so that it's going to reflect who he is as a complicated black man in America. So even as you reflect on your changing values, there are going to be some values and virtues that are impenetrable. For many of us, that's our faith and our belief in God. Don't leave that at home. Bring it to college. It has a place. For others, it's a commitment to community building. Bring that along with you. Don't throw that one overboard. You don't come here as a blank slate. You bring your dreams and your passions and your strengths. So again, even as you reflect on some things that go overboard, also think about those that need to go in your trunk with a double lock on it that aren't going anywhere over the next 40 years. And finally, I want to encourage you to connect. So often as I'm teaching African American literature, especially some of the autobiographies that are male authored, the narrator has this attitude like, it's me against the world. What's striking is that Langston Hughes' autobiography was published in 1940, in the same year as the works of another great African American writer, Richard Wright. And one of the things that readers after the fact have noted about Wright is how often he presents himself as an isolated intellectual, as he presents himself as being the only one from his hometown who had any idea that books were interesting. But this really isn't the reality of most people who thrive and survive. So what I instead liked about Langston Hughes' autobiography, perhaps even over Wright's, is immediately after he says that he has thrown these books overboard and it seems like he's saying, it's just me, I'm coming up with my own ideas, he details how he's making new friends on the ship. So even at the same time that it's all about independence, he's immediately realizing again that he needs to have a community around him that's going to be supportive. And I would say that that same message applies to us here. Think about how you can align yourself with those here on campus who have similar values and goals. You may want to be involved in the Band of Brothers or to set up some kind of study groups. Identify mentors, those who look like you and those who don't, who can support your achievement. But even as I extend Hughes's metaphor or example of throwing books overboard, I also want to encourage you to connect. Connect because if you find that it's not just the disempowering knowledge that's going overboard, but that you are going overboard, that your mind, that your soul, that your mental health, that your physical strength, that you're totally stressed out, that you seem to be jumping ship, then it's time for a SOS. And I want for you to remember that there are many representatives at the Bell Center and all across this campus from this moment who are willing to extend you a life jacket if it's ever needed. Call on the resources here and elsewhere to make sure that you maintain your balance and you stay connected. I'm really, really excited about what's going on for the class of 2017. Because even as you throw some things overboard, throw out those old mindsets, those old books, those ineffective mindsets, you're beginning to write new books, new life stories. And let me say again here that writing is only a metaphor. It may not be with pens and pencils. See, you might be writing your life story with math formulas or with architectural designs and drafts. You might be writing it with chemistry formulas or with diagrams. But whatever you do, whatever is your means of writing your story, of staying aboard ship, do it well. Write the vision and make it plain. As each of you embarks on your own big sea, I hope that you will do what you love, ask the hard questions, reflect on your growth, and connect with others along the way. Thank you very much. And best wishes.
All right, come on, we can do better than that. Please give Dr. Williams another round. I'm looking across the audience, making sure some of the past speakers from early arrival program, that was one of the best early arrival program speeches that we've had. Students, I hope you're taking notes, or I hope you have a good memory. Again, do, ask, reflect, connectedness. I couldn't have said it better in regards to how important this is going to be during your time here at The Ohio State University. There's a couple other things that Dr. Williams mentioned, finding your voice. What do you need to throw overboard? Threshold of destiny, coming of age. So again, I hope you really paid attention during this keynote speech. This, I think, will really help you throughout your first year and just your entire undergraduate career here at the university. Dr. Williams, on behalf of the Tide Anthony Bell National Resource Center, we want to thank you. We have a gift for you.
Kim gives them to me.
So just a token of our appreciation, a couple of goodies, some things that we have from the Bell Resource Center. So again, please give Dr. Williams another round of applause. Well, great. We're going to wrap up shortly here with the opening session. For parents and family members, I ask that for those of you who are staying, I ask that you stay here. At 2:30, we'll have our parent and family member panel discussion. We'll have faculty and staff from the Ohio State University who will serve on that panel, as well as some of the current students. For the students, after kind of talking to some of the current students who are here, as well as faculty and staff who I'm going to acknowledge shortly, I ask that you follow the ambassadors, the current students who you met. For some of you who you met at registration or at the Hill Hall, they're going to take you back over to the Hill Hall for the next session. First, I want to acknowledge our ambassadors. If they could come in, I just want to acknowledge them real quick and just tell you who they are and just their role here with the Early Arrival Program at the Bell Resource Center. There's a couple already inside.